Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fort Master, and welcome back to another game theory reaction. The deadly plants of Genshin Impact. I'm just going to be upfront about this. I have absolutely no idea how Genshin Impact is, what story there is behind it. I know, anime girls, so that's their biggest selling point. I know I've been seeing a lot of videos sponsored by it recently, almost to the point where it's almost for me at least, it's almost become sort of like the next Raid Shadow Legends, where just you see the ads for it everywhere. And I also know that last year there was a huge kerfuffle about a mod that made one of the characters extra. But other than that, again, I know next to nothing about this game. So the fact that there are very deadly plants in the world, well, we'll have to see, won't we?
Thanks to Genshin Impact for sponsoring today's episode. Alright class, your assignment was to demonstrate reactions incorporating the tree-based element of Dendro. Tartaglia, I see you're using your hydro powers, very good there. Hu Tao, yours is,
fire.
Burning. Not entirely sure what you expected there, but yep, it's a reaction. Naimiko, how you getting along?
Show them.
Sorry, Yai, but you'll find that wood isn't a very effective conductor of electricity. I'm gonna have to lower your score.
Emerge.
I think I may have an idea where the deadly thing may come from.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that loves its waifus, but not as much as it loves its science. And there is plenty of both to talk about today thanks to our sponsor, Genshin Impact. The game has just released their 4th country update. In it, you'll be exploring the new region of Sumeru, featuring a plethora of biomes ranging from the lush rainforests around the capital city to a desert full of underground ruins and buried lore. The main story quest focuses on a time loop where several characters start to realize that they've been reliving the same day over and over again, which itself has some fascinating scientific implications, but that's not what I want to focus on today. You see, each new party member in Genshin Impact is associated with one of 7 different elements: Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, Electro, Geo, and Animo. But at the start of this new storyline, we're introduced to Nihida, an archon of a brand new element known as Dendro, which comes from the Greek dendron, meaning tree. Now, plant-based powers, always fun to use in games, but there's more here than just vine whipping and razor leaves. Combat in Genshin Impact is based on creating elemental reactions by combining different elements. Most do what you'd expect. Combine Hydro and Cryo and you're getting yourself a freeze reaction. Combine Cryo and Pyro and you get the melt reaction. Makes sense. But with these new Dendro powers, things start to get a little bit more unexpected. Sure, combining Dendro with Pyro causes burning, and combining Dendro with Hydro causes the growth of seeds. Nothing out of the ordinary there. But what really captured my curiosity was when I started mixing plants with electricity. Now, I'm sure we all remember 2nd grade science class where we learned that wood isn't the best conductor of electricity.
Yeah, it's an insulator.
It doesn't seem to be that way in Genshin Impact. When you use Yai Miko's electro attacks with Nihida's Dendro ones, your attacks get stronger, which at first might seem obvious. Combining 2 attacks equals 1 stronger attack, but it also produces a quicken effect. And no, I'm not talking about personal finance software here. This is a base effect which increases the damage of your next electro or Dendro attack, creating either aggravate or spread respectively. Now that alone was unexpected, but even more interesting was when you mixed 3 elements. Dendro plus Hydro equals Bloom, but mixing in Electro as the 3rd ingredient creates an elemental cocktail known as Hyper Bloom, turning the seeds into guided missiles that seek out the nearest enemy. I don't care how many gigawatts you got, you are not getting seeds to leap up into the air to become guided missiles, right? Right? Well, I was curious about the...
I will say, I think there's a tree. Forget whether it's somewhere in the rainforest or Australia. But its seeds are in its bark. It's nicknamed like the bullet tree or something because the seeds will literally shoot off. And to the point where they are deadly, or at least very painful if they hit you.
These reactions and whether or not they were based in some form of reality. So I did a bit of digging, only to find that there's way more to the relationship between plants and electricity than our school science classes would have us believe. So stick with me, theorists, because I got a feeling that...
Oh, okay, so this actually just reminds me of a story, the sort of connection between plants and electricity. I remember when I was little, for the longest time, I thought plants had it just in a natural aversion to like electricity or like the electromagnetic field around like power lines. Because for the longest time, you see them, and the trees, they'd, like, grow around the power lines and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. They just do it naturally. It wasn't until years later. It's not even the fact I saw, like, people trimming them. I had to be told that that trees didn't do that naturally.
That today's theory is really gonna grow on you. So outside of strapping some jumper cables onto my ficus, where can I see the effects of electricity on plants? Well, one of the most common occurrences are during lightning storms. Lightning occurs when particles inside a cloud collide with each other, knocking electrons free, which then attach to other particles. The particles that lose their electrons now have a slightly positive charge and are lighter, thus they go to the top of the cloud. The ones that gain electrons are now heavier and have a slightly more negative charge, causing them to go to the bottom of the cloud. Those slightly negative particles also now need a way to equalize. So when the positive and negative charges grow large enough, that's when you get lightning. It's the discharge as everything equalizes. The ground is also positively charged, which is why lightning is sometimes able to jump downwards towards Earth. But here's where
alternatively, you can also have it the other way, where you can have lightning shooting up because the ground is negatively charged and the cloud is positively charged.
To get interesting. You see, air isn't a very good conductor, and lightning wants to take the path of least resistance. That's why it'll strike a lightning rod or a tall building. They're the fastest path to a positive charge and are often made of conductive materials like metal. And while trees aren't exactly the most conductive, they are tall. So they immediately become a much more attractive option than just traveling through plain old air. And the relationship
It's also when you get either explosions or fire.
Trees and lightning doesn't just stop there. Trees are made up of roughly 50% water, with a lot of that moisture contained just below the bark. Meanwhile, a single bolt of lightning can generate temperatures of about 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly 30,000 degrees Celsius. Believe it or not, that's about 6 times hotter than the surface of the sun. And so what happens when you heat water really quickly in an enclosed space? Well, it turns into a gas and expands.
You know what? I was just thinking, it's actually kind of funny how many times, like, oh, it's like going to the surface of the sun, or like it's hotter, it's like the surface of the sun or something. And it's amazing when you actually start looking at the number of things that are hotter than the surface of the sun on a planet. I mean, granted, they don't stick around for that long, but still, the fact that, you know, something can be hotter than the surface of a star on a planet
needs a place to go in a hurry. In an instant, the pressure inside the tree builds until finally the gas pushes so hard that the bark can't handle it anymore, causing the tree to literally explode. Wood and splinters are sent flying everywhere, as if we didn't need more reasons to stay indoors playing video games. Now, these splinters aren't exactly homing missiles, but it does show that tree plus water plus electricity does result in flying plant projectiles that can do some serious damage on impact. On Genshin Impact! But what about when a tree isn't filled with water? In the game, if you combine Dendro and Electro, one of the effects that you get is Aggravate, which boosts the power of your next Electro attack. And that seems kind of weird, right? Why would running electricity through a dry plant make your next electrical attack stronger? Shouldn't have any impact, right? Or maybe even a negative impact?
Static electricity?
This actually lines up with real-world science. In a 2004 Ukrainian study, scientists tested the electrical resistance of a leaf as it slowly dried up. Now, you would think that as the leaf dries up and slowly dies, that its electrical resistance would increase. Less water left in the leaf would mean less ability for electricity to flow.
Well, that's the thing, actually. Water itself also isn't a very good conductor, or at least pure water. It's the stuff in the water that makes it conductive. Salt water is more conductive than, like, fresh water, if I remember correctly.
Right? But no, the drier the leaf became, the easier electricity was able to flow through the parts of the leaf that were still living. The researchers weren't exactly sure why, but they assumed that it might have to do with a stronger concentration of water and salts in the tissue that was left remaining, allowing for greater electrical conductivity. But regardless of the reason, it yet again proves Genshin right in its scientific principles. The first shot of electricity through a plant is basically paving the way for subsequent shocks to be stronger and more effective. So currently the scoreboard is 2 for 2, which means it's time to look at the final elemental reaction spread to see if Genshin can run the perfect game. In combat, spread is the opposite of aggravate. Basically, it uses electro mixed with dendro to make your next dendro attack more powerful. The game even gives us an in-universe explanation for this relationship. We meet a child called Sudebe who tells us that, quote, electro is good. It makes plants stronger and bear more fruits. But that can't be true in real life, right? If electricity truly made plants stronger and more fruitful, why haven't we heard of it before? How How am I able to go apple picking? Wouldn't every farmer ever just electrocute their orchard to
tase
try
the
and
tree.
max out their harvests? Well, when you start to look into it, there's actually a lot more here than meets the eye. Loyal theorists, allow me to introduce you to the new world of an old science, electro-horticulture. This is an old study, but way back in 1746, a researcher named Dr. von Miambre from Edinburgh, Scotland, took 2 myrtle trees and ran an electrical current through one of them to see if it would cause it to grow any differently. Now, there aren't many details available about his exact experiment, but from what I could gather, he used an electrostatic generator to pass a current directly through the tree and back down to the ground. And because static electricity runs at a much lower amperage than a lightning bolt, there was no risk of accidental splinter missiles. Instead, after an entire month of being zapped, the tree appeared to have grown taller and had more leaf growth than its non-electrical twin. This was a huge discovery and could be a great justification for Genshin's claims that adding electro to dendro gives you more powerful dendro. But again, if this was true, why aren't gardeners the world over putting power grids through their fields? To be honest, his conclusions were kind of hard to replicate. Naturally, other scientists saw these crazy findings and conducted similar experiments, but they wound up with mixed results at best. Some claimed that they got the exact same results, others saw no difference, and even more said that their trees outright died due to the electric flow. But if you think a few failed ferns were gonna stop science, then clearly you haven't been watching my videos. In which case, you should probably just hit the subscribe button so you can be on top of all the coolest scientific revelations as they relate to modern gen open world video games. It is a very specific niche, but we are good at it. Anyway, at the very start of 2022, scientists decided to take this very old study in a very new direction. Researchers from the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing attempted to prove that electricity aids the growth of plants. But rather than electrifying the plant itself with static electricity, they decided to instead put the plant inside of an electric field. Basically, they placed the seeds on a metal plate that was connected directly to a negative electrode, and above where the seeds were growing was a metal plate connected to a positive electrode. This created an electric field between them as the positive and negative charges tried desperately to come together. After 3 days of germination, seed growth inside the electric field was 40% higher than the control group. When it came to seedling growth, the electrofield resulted in a growth increase of 15%. All in all, the plants inside the electrofield gave a crop yield that was 20% higher than the control group. Seems bizarre, right? Like, why would being in the presence of electricity change plant growth so dramatically? Unfortunately, the research paper doesn't provide an explanation, but you know what? I think I can. Science has shown that thunderstorms tend to help with plant growth not just because of increased rainfall, but also because their electrical energy helps separate the nitrogen atoms that are floating around in the air. These atoms then fall to the ground, where they're absorbed by the soil and eventually wind up inside a plant's roots. The University of Melbourne, though, has a different solution. Maybe electric fields act kind of like natural pesticides. The electricity doesn't bother the plant, but it might scare away insects, acting kind of like a low-level bug zapper. There's also the fact that within an electrical field, water tends to have lower surface tension, resulting in faster evaporation after rainfall or watering. Lastly, it might just be what electricity does to the plant itself, effectively boosting the metabolism of the plant by accelerating the transportation of nutrients like calcium and bicarbonates. Regardless of which explanation is correct, when it comes right down to it, plant growth involves a lot of chemical reactions, and electricity appears to have the ability to affect each and every one of them for the better. There you have it, my friends. The electro-dendro effects that we see in the game are absolutely adhering to real-world science. Electricity appears to strengthen, grow, and spread plants, even causing them to sometimes spontaneously explode out like a bunch of low-flying missiles. Sure, the results may be a lot more bombastic in the game than they are in real life, but when the alternative is literally watching the grass grow, I think the choice is obvious. But hey, thanks again to Genshin Impact for sponsoring today's video. It's been really fun to put the lore down for once and instead focus on some of the new cool sciencey aspects of the game. So special thanks to them for letting us roll with something a bit out of the ordinary. That said, it doesn't mean that there isn't new lore for us to discover. In fact, in their
of all the things that would be good together, plants and electricity was definitely not on the list. Again, like all those things, like they're saying it's like, oh, electricity lowers the surface tension of water so it can be absorbed easier, increases like energy, all that stuff. I mean, I wonder, just thinking, I mean, like maybe that could be the next thing of like greenhouses. Like, what is, I've seen the hydroponics. What there are hydroponics that were grown in like this. If you don't know, there is an insulation called rock wool And it's basically, it's like spun igneous rock and like slag and stuff like that into a wool instead of glass. But I remember I heard a story where when they took they had a bad batch, and where they mixed, they had a bad batch where they ruined like spraying the adhesive on it where it would stay together, and at the time it was winter, so they just threw that back, and they get around to throwing it out during the spring. But when they got around to it in the spring, plants were just growing all over it. And when they found that out, they tested it out, and they actually found it was a beautiful, without like the adhesive and stuff in it, it was a beautiful growth medium for plants, for hydroponics, because like plants growing in it, they grew like, what was it, like 15% faster and required 40% less water. So if you could somehow find a way to combine that with this electricity like growth stuff, you could probably start growing food like that. I mean, like, I know asparagus growth. What is it like? I remember hearing a story, the joke that like when you're growing asparagus, you'd walk through the field picking it, and you could hear it growing behind you. So maybe make everything asparagus. Again, that was really cool. This is exactly the reason why I subscribed to game theory all those years ago. Just learning about all this stuff that happens in games that just happens to be somehow real in real life as well. Yeah, that is it for now. And if you have any ideas for anything else you want me to react to, just leave it in the comments below. The link to the original will be obviously in the description. And, yeah, I'll call it there. So, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.